show for all your latest UFC news and rumors. It's Brian Coyle. It's Sean Stanley. It's the TFM Live Podcast. And it's now. It is Wednesday night, meaning the TFM Live Podcast is on the air, presented by the FullMountMMA.com. Sean Stanley here, joined as always by Brian Coyle. How you doing tonight, Brian?
I'm doing fantastic. The Knicks have Derrick Rose. There's hope in New York City once again.
Really? That's your hope?
It's been a long time, Sean.
You know, I thought the funniest thing I saw today was the meme that said, "Bad news for New York. Derrick Rose injured his knee walking it down the plank to get on the airplane to fly to New York."
From all reports inside Madison Square Garden, I can confirm that's not the case. So he's still all right, at least since being traded.
Yeah, no, I thought it was the greatest meme ever. I was like, this is great. They're already started.
I could go into a whole soliloquy about the New York Knicks and Derrick Rose, but that's not why we're here.
No, that is not why we're here.
We're here to talk some mixed martial arts. We're here to talk some UFC. If you've never listened to the show before, we're a mixed martial arts podcast, courtesy of the FullMountMMA.com. You can check out a whole bunch of cool stuff on the website right now. We have a whole big article explaining the best UFC fights of the summer, breakdowns of previous fights, all that good stuff. You'll see the podcast. If you're listening live, great right now. If you can't listen live, don't worry. It will be on the website Thursday, either both cut up into little pieces for your listening pleasure and also one full thing that you can listen to on iTunes. If you want to hear us on iTunes, just subscribe, click that little button right next to our name. And if you like us, review us, comment us, all that great stuff. Sean, it's kind of a quiet week. It's quiet before the storm. I mean, UFC 200 is quietly just 2 weeks away. And, I mean, which is kind of crazy in and of itself because the calendar never ends.
Yeah.
It seems like the UFC. But there's one major story that we have to talk about on today's show, and that's the sale of the UFC. Or, as the UFC wants you to believe, there is no sale. Nothing is happening. Pay no attention to the inner workings behind the curtain.
Don't worry about all that smoke. There's really not a fire over here. Don't worry about it.
No, not at all. It's not like Lorenzo Fertitta all of a sudden is getting back into the Station Casino's business. Oh, wait. According to Mike Chiappetta of Bleacher Report, Lorenzo Fertitta is now a full-time employee of Station Casinos, and he stepped down in 2008 because it was getting too much for him. With his full-time stuff with the UFC. That's just a little nugget of the craziness that's probably happened the past couple days regarding this sale, and we talked about it on last week's show. But now this is a real thing, and it appears to be done. According to Jeremy Botter, who's extremely tapped in and extremely credible.
Well, he better hope so, because his credentials could get taken from 200. I'm just saying.
I mean, if you listen to Dana White on the Jim Norton and Matt Serra UFC Unfiltered podcast, you can hear a whole big story about a certain reporter whose credentials were lifted and then brought back. And you don't want to anger the UFC, apparently, if you're an
Hear me roar!
It's something else. Bada reported yesterday, actually this morning, he confirmed the report that the UFC sale has been completed to the William Morris Endeavor-led group. Multiple sources, this is courtesy of FlowCombat.com, Jeremy Botter, and FlowCombat.com. Multiple sources confirmed the news to Flow Combat early Wednesday morning that the UFC has been sold by Zuffa to an investment group led by William Morris Endeavor-IMG Agency. The group also includes Dalian Wanda, China's largest commercial property owner and operator of the largest chain of movie theaters in the world. Tencent, the owner of China's largest internet portal and search engine, and the Kraft Group, which may sound familiar because Bob Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots, is in charge of that. The reported deal was for close to $4.2 billion for the UFC. And to put it in perspective, Manchester United, Real Madrid, major sports franchises around the world, the soccer teams, I mean, you get the Cowboys were valued at over $1 billion. The UFC is being sold for $4.2 billion, which is frankly amazing given where this entity and this sport was just 10, 15 years ago when originally Dana White and the Fertittas bought the UFC for $1 million. And seemed like, I mean, this is the report. We've been hearing this for months now at this point. Even ESPN's Darren Ravel had stuff like, oh, it's getting closer and closer. But the UFC does not appear to like the fact that this is being talked about. They've told their employees the reports are lies. According to Kevin Iole of Yahoo Sports, a UFC spokesman shot down the Flow Combat report. Dave Scholler, the UFC's Vice President of Public Relations, Athlete Marketing and Development, sent a statement to Yahoo Sports saying Flow Combat's report indicating the UFC is sold is false. We've communicated that to our staff members tonight via an internal memo. So, and that doesn't even count the fact that a TMZ report came out today titled UFC No Sale Yet, Not Even Close. And you know the relationship between the UFC and TMZ, which is basically this was filtered out to TMZ, and this could be just literally the UFC putting words in TMZ's mouth. So there's so much going on here, Sean. Like, what is your reaction to this? Like, are they afraid that the report being out of the deal will torpedo it and blow it all up?
Well, I'm wondering if that's part of the fear is them worrying that this deal, something gets out and they're worried about the deal. Because I remember, and I didn't read the whole report, but part of the reason I believe they were mad at Emelianenko was because they were afraid that was going to kill the WWE deal.
Yes, Dana White on that podcast that we mentioned earlier talked about it possibly ruining a relationship that took 15 years to cultivate. And I'm not going to try to read through the tea leaves here, but I think we can all kind of understand that may be Vince McMahon. Because they probably had to move heaven and earth to get Brock Lesnar on this UFC 200 card.
Well, they did. I mean, you're already looking at things coming out, supposedly. Van Zant might be at SummerSlam, then possible Rousey at WrestleMania. I mean, not to mention other things that happened. Plus, they're paying Lesnar probably a lot of money, I'm thinking, saying something he's doing out of the kindness of his heart, I'm sure.
Completely.
So, maybe that's something that they're worried about, because ultimately, I mean, it's again, you got UFC 200 coming up, their biggest card, their biggest weekend of events coming up, International Fight Week, and now this. So, do they want the announcement to be at UFC 200, another blockbuster announcement during a pay-per-view? I mean, is that what's happening here? And they're trying to keep it under wraps? And, I mean, they should know by now that nothing's going to be kept under wraps. I mean, I just go, you know what? We're in talks with people. Nothing's done yet. I mean, how hard is that to say?
It's a very interesting way because the UFC is portraying themselves as a small organization. Yet it's risen to these new heights, and it doesn't seem like they've been able to plug the leaks in the dam to try to, this is the way we want to blow it out. And yes, if it gets reported, that's okay. Guess what?
Here's another thing, too, though, Brian, is that are they worried that, hey, look, they're selling for $4 billion? Some of these fighters are going to be going, wait a minute, why are we making so little?
I mean, that's the argument just now anyway. So guys have been saying that forever. I don't think this is going to change the chorus of fighters' complaints about pay.
Well, no, but I think it's going to be more of a the new group coming in, though, is going to have, I think this is a perfect time for them to sell and just get out.
Completely. Because
this is going to blow up, and you're going to have your financials are going to be out there. People are going to see what the money is being made in this and seeing how... I won't say every fighter is probably underpaid, but there's a good majority of them that are underpaid.
Oh, completely. And this new buyer who's, like we mentioned before, Real Madrid, Manchester United, these kinds of brands aren't worth as much as the UFC. And those have been historic brands. NFL franchises aren't worth as much as the UFC. And that's incredible, given where the UFC once was. And I think they're, like you mentioned, they want to have this big blowout thing. And guess what? When you're getting this big and when you're this important and there's so many moving cogs to this part of the deal and the UFC thinks there's a mole, but maybe this is coming from the other camp. There's a whole, they don't seem to get a good grasp on what's happening here. And guess what? here's a great example. Today, officially, the NHL announced there was a new franchise that will be in Las Vegas for next season. You know when we knew about that? 2 weeks ago when it was officially picked, but it leaked out of the meeting. Did the NHL say, no, we're going to take away the Las Vegas franchise? No, it's going to completely ruin all our plans? No. They went through all of their stuff and then officially announced it today at the official press conference. You have to be able to either, A, plug all these leaks, which I don't think you can do when it comes to a massive kind of thing like this, or deal with the fact that stuff will get reported on. And, I mean, you can deny reports all you want and just say we don't comment on rumors and speculation, like you mentioned, or they can go at it in this kind of way, which I don't think is beneficial to them. It just comes off as petty. And that's not what you want, especially when whoever's buying this is looking at it as like, this is the way that they've been running it? Is this the way this actually goes? And that could hurt them. But it seems like this is going to happen regardless of what goes on. And I think we'll find out with the Fertittas probably moving on to more casino business. Dana White reportedly will stay on. He'll make a lot of money from the sale, get new stock, and then stay on. So I just think it's very tense over there in Zuffa headquarters right now, and they're not having patient and proper reactions to all this.
Well, I think they run it almost like, because again, they're from the casino side. So I think they kind of look at things as you got to kind of keep it secret. And there's nothing that you need to keep secret when these things are coming out. Maybe your finances. But as far as everything else, I mean, it's going to come out. And they do this on everything. We've seen it on, the Brock Lesnar leak and this and that. They're so worried about relationships that, to me, doesn't really seem like they need to be worried about. I mean, if these guys are offering you $4.2 billion to buy the company, I'm sure they're okay with you letting it out.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Vince McMahon was okay with the Brock Lesnar thing because it opens up more for WWE.
Yeah, I mean, and they got a whole bunch of other problems there with one of their biggest draws.
No, yeah, well,
testing positive on that wellness policy. But it's like,
hey, you know what? At least they suspend their stars. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, it's just very weird for an organization that's being sold reportedly for $4.2 billion to deal with this news and these reverberations around their sport and not being prepared to deal with that. I don't know. It just comes off as very weird for something.
I just wonder who their PR is. Do they have a PR? Are they the PR? I mean, that's what I'm trying to figure out because, look, it's not like somebody had to call Botter and all these other people and say, hey, this is happening.
Yeah.
It's not like they just accidentally rolled up on this transaction happening in a parking lot or something.
No.
They got tipped off on this stuff somehow.
And the interesting thing is, the UFC was talking about finding a mole within the company when the Ariel Helwani stuff happened. And half of the time, you get it from Dana White went on national TV on ESPN to the night before the Brett Okamoto stuff.
Yeah.
And lied to his face.
Yeah. Yep. And
we've heard stories about Dana lying to people's faces and sending out fake information left and right. So you don't know what to believe. And that's a reporter's job to kind of parse through all the BS and find what's the actual thing of the problem. And these guys are not going to throw out hey, the UFC is being sold.
Yeah, don't forget who Brock Lesnar's manager is too. You know what I'm saying? In real life, it's a guy that says no publicity is bad publicity. So I'm just throwing that out there.
It's just a very weird spot for the UFC to put themselves in, and I think they could turn this into a positive instead of ending up looking kind of petty about all this.
I think it's too late, though. I think it's too late.
Well, now at the point when you just funnel straight news to TMZ, which it just the whole story looked really weird on the website.
And then the fact that you have to send out a release that you have sent a statement to your employees internally,
and that's going to make the people that work there so nervous.
Yeah, I mean, no, yeah, but I mean, to me, it just seems like, look, if this was a situation, why wasn't that released when the first rumor started?
Yeah.
Now you're releasing it after the confirmation of the rumor.
They got to get their house in order,
or maybe they don't need to get the house in order because the house is being sold.
Yeah, well, they got to get. Well, the people that live in that house, they have to get their house in order for the new owners that are coming in. This whole situation is really weird. We can basically figure out this is going to happen. We wouldn't see all this smoke without there being fire. So this sale news, we can only wait and see because 200's not that close away, and you don't want to be scrambling and dealing with all this when you have the biggest show of the year of possibly the UFC's history coming up in 2 weeks on July 9th. And like you mentioned, International Fight Week. There's a whole bunch of stuff besides just that Saturday night. There's a title being defended on that Thursday night. There's a title being defended on that Friday night. There's a whole bunch of great stuff. And there could be more big names coming back to the UFC, which we'll talk about in a second.
There could actually be a debut, I heard, soon.
Oh, yeah. There could be a debut of some sort.
Like 10 years in the making.
Yeah. So this is a major deal that's going to have to be dealt with on some level, if not the highest levels, before things start.
Do we want to take a bet on if at UFC 200 all of a sudden they're doing a promo and it says UFC sold?
No, there will be no epic Brock Lesnar-esque promo describing that the UFC has been sold. But I would not be surprised if the press release is broken that week about this, or they'll wait and do it after.
Or maybe they do it on July 8th because July 7th they've already scheduled another big event to happen on top of the fight card.
Oh, the thing that will completely overtake the fights for the next 2 days when Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz
the press
have a
conference.
professional trash talking contest against one another
live on stage.
Oh, I mean, it's a brilliant idea. If only they could have done that for UFC 200 in Madison Square Garden.
Well, the thing is, you think you can't put that like July 6th and lead into July 7th and 8th and 9th? I mean, why put everything in one day?
Well, now we're just getting into the detail-oriented schedules of the UFC at this point, which is what we don't need to do. So
come on, let's take it the way it doesn't need to go.
How about we take a quick break? When we come back here on the podcast, we've got someone who announced that he's ready to return to the UFC. And he did it on the show of somebody who was recently uncredentialed. So that little show, apparently, according to other people in MMA media, kind of got a big push and it kind of got a big announcement on it. So we'll talk about that. We got to talk about Fedor,
could
Sean.
Could that be a UFC apology?
A UFC apology? No, that's not happening.
But no, I'm saying, but that's their apology by letting him go out there and make that announcement on his show. Like,
yeah,
I'm sorry. Here you go.
Maybe I doubt it. I think that's just good friendship. We'll talk about it. We got to talk about Fedor, dude. We have to.
Do we really?
It's a thing.
Okay, all right.
It's a thing.
I think it's a thing that we should just skip right over.
I mean, you can skip over it. I gotta mention it. Like you mentioned, there might be a debut after all. We may have some information on that. So we'll take a quick break. We'll talk about that and more when we come back on TFM Live, the official podcast of the Full Mount MMA.com.
For all your latest news and rumors of the UFC, go to thefullmountmma.com. Now back to the TFM Live podcast. Here's Brian Coyle and Sean Stanley.
All right, Sean Stanley, Brian Coyle back with you. We kind of discussed the sale of the UFC to get us started, and now we are moving on, I believe, to Mr. GSP.
George St-Pierre, Sean.
That guy. That's him.
He's going to be back in the octagon soon. At least that's what it seems like.
You don't say.
Monday, he was on Ariel Helwani's MMA Hour and basically announced that he has decided to end his hiatus from the octagon, and return to the UFC. He said his agents are in negotiations, so he can't say this, he can't say that. But GSP did a training camp. He felt great. He loves the sport. He feels like he's at his best right now. So GSP seems like he's going to come back, and the UFC will obviously get this deal done eventually.
But my question is this: who's he dealing with?
That's a great question. We don't know.
That could let us know a lot.
We don't. Maybe we'll wait. But one of the greatest welterweights of all time, of course, George St-Pierre.
And let me guess, he's going to step right back into the title picture.
Not at welterweight, it seems like. There have been rumors. Michael Bisping, the new middleweight champion. Like your Dan Henderson thing that from a couple weeks ago, not that far off, apparently.
Told you, man. I told you. It's like a story that you cannot give up. That story. I mean, it's come on.
But I think if George St. Pierre wants a shot at the middleweight title, which would be very interesting, given GSP's welterweight dominance, that could happen. We don't know what's going to happen with Bisping's next opponent. Chris Weidman supposedly is feeling better. I mean, that neck surgery looked gruesome, but all of a sudden he was training. Like he's going to be training. He was. I think the report was 6 weeks after his surgery, which was like a couple weeks ago. He'd start doing intense training again, which is amazing, given that type of surgery that he had.
Yeah.
Middleweight is obviously a quagmire. You've got Jacare Sosa, who I believe should get that title shot and fight Bisping. Rockhold, who got punched in the mouth after letting his hubris get the better of him at UFC 199.
Yes, I called it.
Yeah, you did call that one. Absolutely. Yoel Romero is coming off of the
suspension.
The suspension for substance abuse or performance-enhancing drugs. And so there's a whole bunch of moving parts there. And we've talked about the fact that the belts, what do the belts actually mean? Should we just have super fights? Is it actually a super fight between Bisping and GSP? So I'm just happy to have GSP back. I think now the sport getting cleaner, because it's not clean by any stretch yet, but getting cleaner. I mean, with the USADA testing, supposedly Brock Lesnar was tested 5 times in the past 2 weeks.
Well, that's because Mark Hunt said he was a walking steroid.
Yes. So, I mean, they're making up for lost time there. With GSP, it was always a problem. He said, I mean, he was beat up. He wanted to recover. And then the sport guys were using stuff, and he didn't enjoy it. He didn't like it. So what do you think about GSP's comeback? It's great, right?
Yeah, it's great for the sport. The one thing, again, you know, like you had Dominic Cruz came back, looked phenomenal. You just don't know what's going to happen when they come back. You've seen Anderson Silva come back and not be himself or not be what we saw him before be. And will the same thing happen to GSP?
He's 35 years old. He's healthy. He hasn't fought since, 2013?
Yeah, it just seems so weird because
Hendricks.
I thought Lesnar fought before since like 2011 was the last. I was like, wow.
It's weird how these years kind of start to blend together.
Yeah,
GSP hasn't fought since defending the belt against Johnny Hendricks, and man, how far has Johnny Hendricks fallen since then?
Yeah.
So, and that segues perfectly in what I wanted to talk about at welterweight, because welterweight is absolutely nasty right now, and GSP maybe doesn't want to jump into that, and instead, I mean, we could always get the Condit fight, which I would always be a fan of, but welterweight right now, Sean, very dangerous, especially because given the fact that Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, I mean, if he's not the number one contender, they don't have a number one contender because that UFC Ottawa performance, he made Rory McDonald, who is one of the best all-around fighters, or was, because we have to get into talk about McDonald for a little bit. Thompson just made him look silly. And it wasn't the most exciting fight, and it wasn't what we hoped it would be. But Thompson's untouchable right now, it seems like.
I think true MMA fans enjoyed the fight. I think your ones that, you know, on FS1, they seem to get a wide array of MMA fans. So maybe some of them might not have been happy with the performance of the thing. But if you watch it from an MMA standpoint, it was a great chess match that Thompson just totally took over.
I mean, those MMA fans who didn't like that fight, they got to see Steve Bossy and Sean O'Connell beat the crap out of each other.
Yes, that was
15
good.
minutes.
That was good.
And we barely mentioned Steve Bossy last week, but
I didn't think that thing was going to go out of the first round.
Yeah.
And then, man, wow. The boss, baby, the boss.
Well, and we'll get into the undercard in a bit. Let's stick. Thompson, he's the number one contender. Give him a title shot.
Yep.
But that's the way it goes, okay? Because
it was one versus two, and he outclassed one, so he's got to move up and be next in line.
And this seems to always happen, but the loser seems a lot. It's a more interesting story here. We wrote a whole article that you could see on the fullmountmma.com. You can find on my Twitter at bcoyle11. I think Sean, you tweeted it out SS Sports Talk and at the Full Mount on Twitter about McDonald and the way his contract was structured. This was his last fight. He was betting on himself. I think, and we said there wasn't much of a downside. After watching that fight, I'm kind of revisiting my opinion here because of a couple things. Number one, he looked tentative the entire fight.
Yes.
He didn't want to jump in. He didn't want to.
Yeah,
he didn't want to get caught.
Nope.
Until the fifth round, where he kind of just went for it, and he looked better there. But the second thing is, and it's one of these little things that kind of it's gonna get passed over, but McDonald's got a bad nose. After it got busted up in the title fight against Lawler,
yeah,
it broke again against Thompson.
Yep.
And when you get a broken nose like that repeatedly over and over, this is going to be a thing whenever he fights. His nose going to break. Unless he gets some different surgery on this.
Yeah, but I mean, how much the bones in your nose are so, I'm not going to say they're brittle, but, you know, I mean, you can only do so much. I mean, it's not like you can put a metal plate up in your nose.
No, and this is the danger here, because getting punched, we always talk about this, when a fighter goes to a war like that, like he did against Lawler, if you get punched in the mouth like that, it changes you as a fighter, either for good or for bad. You can either come in more focused, more defensive of what you want to do, and just be more of a planner when it comes to this stuff, instead of someone who improvs more in the octagon. But McDonald here, he looked different. He looked like he didn't want it didn't look Anthony Pettis-like, but it worried me a little bit. What about you? When you watched him?
No, he looked tentative, but then another thing is, you know, these guys had trained together.
Yeah.
You know, so, I mean, you know what you're getting, I guess. And to me, I'm going to guess, and this is only my opinion here, is that when they trained together, I'm thinking Thompson got the better end of that deal.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Because he just was, like, so tentative. And also, I mean, maybe he's protecting the nose. Maybe he knew he wasn't, you know, a couple punches to the nose and you know, this is done, you know. So, you know, I won't say that, you know, but to me, it just seemed like there was more to this. That was not the same Rory McDonald that we saw against Lawler. It wasn't. And then whether that was because Thompson had the perfect game plan or there was hesitation by McDonald, it was just one of those fights where, like I said, if you were not an MMA fan and you didn't understand what was going on, you would have been chanting boring.
Completely. And it's just, I'm worried about Rory now.
Yeah.
I think he'll re-sign with the UFC. I mean,
at
it
a
won't
much
be for
smaller deal.
Nearly what he wanted. Mm-hmm. If you're Bellator or World Series of Fighting, I think you go hard at him.
Yeah, I think you offer the world to him and see if you can just get him for a couple fights, but I just don't know. Watching how he looked against Thompson, who do you match him up against if you're a UFC matchmaker? Because nothing to me right now with the way he looked, none of the top guys, and I understand he's going to be probably in the top 5 after or whatever because he was one. I don't know how far he'll fall, but I just don't think that McDonald is a guy you put into the fight.
It's funny. The name that kind of pops up to me, and it could be really dangerous for him, Gunnar Nelson. That's a guy who I think it would be a better fight for McDonald because Nelson, I mean, more recently, he kind of showcased the fact that he can really beat people up. But Nelson seems to be more of a thinking man's fighter. And it's a great opportunity if he goes against a guy like McDonald to really claim a big name here. And I think McDonald has to fight somebody. I mean, putting him against Maia is a bad idea. Putting him against Condit, I don't think that would be beneficial to him. If you kind of want to build him back up again, you have to put him against somebody lower on the totem pole. You put him against Kelvin Gastelum, who fights at 200. It's a weird spot for Rory right now, and I really like the way he fights, and I like his personality. I like him as a fighter. It's just, to me, that nose thing it's just gonna bother me every time he fights, and if it's bothering me, it's gotta bother him.
Well, you're so worried about getting hit in the nose. He was getting hit everywhere else for a while, and then he finally went for it, and he got jabbed in the nose, and it just opened up
completely. And it wasn't
like he took a lot of punishment to the face until the last round, but the first punch to the nose was that did it. It wasn't like it was like, with Robbie Lawler, where it was just constant fighting and hitting to the face. There was like 2 punches to his nose before it just busted open.
Completely. And we'll see what the future holds for Rory McDonald. But all I know is Stephen Thompson, man, I can't wait to see him against, either Lawler or Woodley. And I think it's going to be Lawler. And I think that's an amazing piece of matchmaking. It's an amazing fight waiting to happen. But he's got to get through Woodley first. I think it's going to be great. The other fights on this card that we need to talk about, Cowboy Cerrone looked awesome in that fight against Patrick Cote.
As long as he's not in a heavyweight or in a title fight, he's there. I don't get it.
He's money. He absolutely obliterated Cote. He beat him every which way possible.
Almost like he was playing with him.
Completely. And he's the smaller guy. You saw it. He was clearly the smaller guy. Cote's a former middleweight, so he's a big welterweight. Cerrone's just popping up there, showing up, beating him up, leaving. He wants to get paid more. Dana White's like, no way, dude. You made $200,000 on a $900,000 gate. It's Cerrone. It's just so fun to watch. And for a guy like you mentioned it last week, who seems so crazy and does all these stupid things outside the octagon, harmless stupid things nonetheless. But man, he is a tactician.
Did you say harmless stupid things?
Well, yeah. Harmless to anybody but him, possibly.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like okay, yes, harmless. Yes, to anybody but himself. Okay.
Yeah, there have been much worse guys outside the octagon than Cerrone.
Well, no, yeah, but I thought you just meant like doing harmless stuff in general. I'm like, no, he's doing pretty harmful stuff that could happen to him, but nobody else.
Flipping his truck, jumping out of planes. Yeah.
It's showing up at practice right after he flipped it.
Yeah, it's fine. But Cerrone all over the place, and I don't know what's better for him, lightweight, welterweight. I like that he's bouncing around. I like that he's doing cowboy things or just fighting all the time.
Yeah.
Supposedly he's got his next fight already lined up. Which
the way I see it is just don't give him a title fight and you'll have money. That's it.
Yeah, he's won 10 out of the last 11.
Yep.
Except for the title fight.
Yeah, he didn't show up for that one. I don't know why. He just didn't show up for that fight. I don't get it.
He started faster in this fight, too, which I noticed, which I like to see out of Sony, because that's the one knock on him. He's kind of the guy who starts really slow.
I think he wanted to kind of get that out there to where, look, if I want to start fast, I can start fast. I think he's just trying to silence the critics there.
Yeah, and the two other fights that are worth mentioning, Valerie Letourneau and Joanne Calderwood in the first ever 125-pound catchweight bout. Mm-hmm. Calderwood wins by TKO in a really weird ending that the referee didn't seem like he knew what was going on. Letourneau got kicked in the chest. Mm-hmm. It came out today that we can blame Reebok for something else because she was having a, quote,
wardrobe malfunction.
Which, does everyone pretty much believe that about the Reebok stuff? Absolutely.
Yeah.
The way their stuff's going. Yep. So, but Calderwood.
The kick stretched out the top. That's what happened.
Yeah.
And she just couldn't get the whatever. Just
figure it out.
Yeah. It was like, and luckily, I think Calderwood saw it, so didn't punish her there and waited. Actually let her right herself, and then there was a little bit more after that.
Calderwood, but if that didn't happen, it seemed like Calderwood was going to win the fight anyway. Much deserved. She got a performance bonus way after the fact because she said, like, I have to go back to working another real job before I go back to TriStar and learn some more things, which got the attention of Dana White and the Fertittas, who gave her a fight bonus because Steve Bossy and Sean O'Connell decided to literally just throw punches for 15 minutes.
Oh,
and
dude, that was just.
Man. There were brain cells flying left and right.
Yeah, the last 15 seconds of that fight too was pretty.
Oh, they literally high-fived and went back to beating the crap out of each other.
Just stood right there in front of each other. I mean, it was, it's been happening a lot lately, and in some other fights too. But that's just like, all right, let's go. Let's see what happens. See who falls.
I mean, it's not gonna. It shortened those guys' careers by a couple fights, but
oh yeah,
man, that was one of the most fun fights in recent memory.
Yep.
To watch.
You didn't want to talk about it last week.
Yeah,
I had to bring it up because of the boss.
I mean, the boss looked great. He looked very tan, but he also looked great.
Yeah, he looked freakishly tan.
Yeah, freakishly tan fighters did well on that card.
Yeah.
Cerrone looked tan. Thompson looked tan.
Yeah, must have been the lighting.
Won.
Must have been the lighting in Canada.
It's Canada.
Yeah.
What's going on? But we got a couple more things to talk about here before we close out. CM Punk's possible debut, UFC 203. Now, Sean.
Mm-hmm.
That would be in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
Or Stipe Miocic was having a grand old time at the Cleveland celebrations.
He was leading the parade today.
Kevin Love wearing many championship belts of various organizations.
Yeah, and shirts of a Skull beer drinking young
variety.
Man. Yeah.
And then some people, J.R. Smith, Amon Shumpert, Mo Williams.
Well, J.R. Smith just can't find his shirt. I don't know what's going on there.
I think J.R. Smith's shirt is in Las Vegas somewhere. So maybe the people over at Zuffa can find that.
Even LeBron came out with a particular brand of
Warrior
clothing.
shirt.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been so much to choose from. And Cleveland now might be the spot, not only just for Stipe Miocic's first title defense, but for CM Punk's debut. He's going to be, we're recording this on a Wednesday night. He's going to be on that UFC Unfiltered podcast with Jim Norton and Matt Serra on Thursday, the 23rd, for whenever you're listening to this. Would I be surprised if that's when they announced the date? I don't know. Could happen. Could not.
No,
I don't know anything.
I don't think there's any other reason to talk to him, though. I mean, if you think about it. What
Also,
else?
The Rock is going to be on that podcast.
Yeah. Well,
So-
maybe they talk all things WWE or something. I don't know.
And when in doubt, listen to what The Rock does. 'Cause
Yeah.
The Rock can really do no wrong at this point. So
No.
maybe he can give CM Punk some point.
We even ate his first candy the other night on.
On Jimmy Fallon.
yeah.
That's true. The other thing that we must talk about here, Fedor Emelianenko. It seems like the UFC thing is closer
we must
than
talk
ever.
about this
We have to talk about this because
Okay.
he could end up in the UFC. This is why we have to talk about this.
at a discounted rate.
Well, that's for sure. After the performance at the, is it the EFN 50? It's the Elite Fight Nights.
Yeah, nothing elite about that.
That's for sure. It was broadcast. Fedor's fight, which was part of a very, very weird Russian fight card that ended up with a spider lady singing song. I don't know. Lots of stuff going on in Russia that we can't comprehend. The commentary was less than top notch, I would say, for that fight. And then it was broadcast on UFC Fight Pass, which got a whole big revamp, which I've heard nothing but great things about for UFC Fight Pass. So check it out there. They
I
got
told
free
you
trials.
should check it out there.
I know. I really got to get on that.
One day you're gonna have to get on there. One day.
But Fedor beats Fabio Maldonado, but he was the one who got beat. He was absolutely beat up by a dude who was last seen being a punching bag for Rampage Jackson in the UFC. And Maldonado, who's an elite boxer from all stretch. He's undefeated.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to mixed martial arts, hasn't had the most successful career at all. He fights Fedor, and to give you guys a quick recap, he beat him up. He should have won. Fedor won. But Russia, home cooking.
Decision.
Yeah. It was not Fedor's brightest shining moment by any stretch of the imagination. And now it seems like he's kind of going to the UFC, which, if you're the UFC, of course it's still worth it for him to have one more fight because it is Fedor. But I think that's all you're going to get out of this guy because he got rocked big time during this fight. Does it appeal to you, Sean? Let me ask you this because I know we've been very outspoken with the fact that how overrated Fedor's comeback has been. Would you be interested in a Fedor fight on a UFC card as a headlining fight?
Absolutely not, unless it's a fight pass.
So, pay-per-view.
I would not pay to see a pay-per-view. No.
Co-main event.
No.
Fedor.
No.
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 Okay.
He does nothing for me anymore. Nothing at all. It just to me, what he was, he had a chance to come back to the UFC with all that hype, and to see these two fights, the way these fights, the way they've gone down, and who he's fought, and how much trouble he's had, is just what for what?
It's a bad job by Fedor, honestly, taking the Jadip Singh fight, which who'd that benefit? Nobody. It just wasted
his
months.
Pocket.
That's the only and then now he gets beat up by Fabio Maldonado, and I think you can get one fight out of him if you're the UFC.
But who and what? What do you do? What?
It's heavyweight, man.
Yeah, but who do you
put him against Verdum, and Verdum beats him. If you want to really close that chapter.
But what does that do for Verdum? Verdum's got more to lose than Fedor right now has nothing to lose.
Which is a weird, interesting position for a guy who was considered the greatest heavyweight of all time.
Yeah. So to me, I wouldn't take a fight with him just because. Why? What do you offer to me?
Interesting. It's so weird because
2 fights ago, I would have put him up against anybody in the UFC and said, okay, it can draw money. Now, I personally, look, they can probably put it as a headliner and it'll probably draw. It's going to draw money. Let's not be, too ridiculous. But for me personally, I'm not interested in it.
It's such a weird spot for him now, and I frankly don't know what to think with him. He can't headline a pay-per-view. I don't think so. Brock Lesnar isn't headlining UFC 200 either.
No. But he creates buzz because he came back to the UFC. He didn't go to EFN or whatever, Japan 6,500 fight night or whatever,
Yeah.
He came back to the top.
Yeah, I don't understand it at all. But I think we'll see him sooner rather than later. I think we'll finally see it happen. But it's going to be a case of what if. And what if we got him a couple fights earlier? What if we got him during his heyday? And instead, I think that will motivate fighters to realize, I only have this limited window, and I need to come back and do it then, and not wait. And it won't always be there. The dream matches won't always be there. The dream fights won't always be there. You don't know what's going to happen.
To me right now, there is no dream fight. If you asked me a couple times ago, I probably would have put him against, when he first was coming back, I think he could have matched up with anybody.
Yeah.
But now, what? Put him against Frank Mir?
He looked great for that first couple minutes until he got punched in the mouth by Maldonado.
Mm-hmm.
It was a wild fight to watch. And it was entertaining, but it looked like years were taken off his life. At the end of that fight, he was all messed up. So, I don't know what to think with Fedor anymore. And we'll see how it goes in terms of his future. And he'll probably end up in the UFC eventually. But, man, what could have been? Sean, you got anything else that you wanted to mention on today's podcast?
Except I won't get that 5 minutes of my life back.
Talking about Fedor?
Yes. But you can reach me at SS Sports Talk, also B Coyle 11 for Brian, and at the Full Mount for thefullmountmma.com.
Yeah, if you got anything that you disagree with vehemently, if you love Fedor,
if you love Fedor, you can
tweet at us all you want.
And let me know, and I'll let you know why you're wrong.
We've got plenty of stuff on the website.
When you get beat
check
by
it out
a guy
right now.
that Rampage Jackson can't even say his name, come on.
Like, how can you take Fabio Baldonado seriously if that's the way Rampage Jackson pronounces Fabio Maldonado's name? Like, come on. So the biggest fights of the summer, we have 3 different fights, 3 different opinions from all 3 of our writers at thefullmountmma.com. You can check out right now. I do a nice basically intro and tell you why the headlining fight for the UFC 200 between John Jones and Daniel Cormier should have been the main event all along, Sean. So I recommend, if you haven't checked it out already.
I check them out every day.
Yeah, I recommend checking it out there because that fight is going to be so good. Coming up the next couple of weeks, we're going to preview everything that UFC 200 has to offer. We got to preview Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Claudia Gadelha's fight. We got to preview Rafael dos Anjos is fighting A. Alvarez for the lightweight title, but you wouldn't know it because they're fighting on Fight Pass. And man, did dos Anjos miss out on an opportunity to make a lot of money with Conor McGregor. We're going to have TFM breakdowns of. My goal is to break down every fight on the UFC 200 card, Sean.
That may
every
be
single
a super duper episode of the TFM Live.
Oh, yes. We will have a jam-packed... We might record 2 episodes that week. One, just a regular news episode, and one with a full breakdown of every fight on those cards as well. Like Sean mentioned, at Coyle11 for me on Twitter, at SS Sports Dog for him, at The Full Mount. You can subscribe to us on iTunes, The Full Mount MMA, TFM Live's podcast. Type it right in the search bar. It'll come up immediately. We post the article. We post the podcast in a YouTube file, the MP3, the podcast, all that good stuff on the website. You'll see if it's Thursday, which is probably when you're listening to this. It'll be right up on the website on thefullmountmma.com. We want to thank you guys for listening. Today's episode. We'll be back next week to talk so much more in the build-up to UFC 200. And hey, maybe the UFC might be sold by then, or maybe the whole deal will be completely off, and we'll talk about that too. Thank you guys for listening, and we're out.
The TFM Live Podcast is brought to you by thefullmountmma.com. Check us out on Twitter at The Full Mount.